I'm joined by Ed Scott, Deputy AD at Virginia. But today we are going to talk about his recent recognition as a Cushman and Wakefield Athletic Director of the Year for his time at Morgan State. Ed, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to see you again, Steph, especially from Charlottesville.
I'm a little bit envious, but we're not going to talk too much about the Who's today. We're going to talk about the Bears. So there's a saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Tell us a little bit about the team that you built at Morgan State that helped you achieve this recognition.
Well, you and I have talked about this in the past in our private conversations and on camera, right? The team is everything. And one of the things that I learned before I go into certain individuals and how we did it at Morgan, Steph, is that I don't think I know, is that if you really want to get things yourself, you help others get what they want. And I think that's what we did at Morgan, right? We put Morgan, I say we intentionally, put Morgan in a position it wasn't in before. And that has given me opportunities that I probably wouldn't have thought about 5 years ago. And to your question about the team, I think that's probably been one of my strengths, was to be able to recruit a diverse team at Morgan. And when I say diversity, not just in race and gender, and experience, right, at different levels, folks who wanted to grow, folks who weren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and do some hard work. When I received word that I was going to win the award, I thought back to my first days at Morgan, and folks understood where Morgan was when I left recently to come to Charlottesville and join Virginia. But what a lot of folks don't remember is when I started there, Morgan was in the middle of a major infractions case. And so what it taught me about progress, right? I think the award for me stands more about teamwork and progress, to answer your question directly, more so than anything else, anything that I did individually.
Well, let's go back in time to 2016 when you were coming in as a new AD there. You had a strong internal background.
Yeah.
How did you get up to speed and get comfortable working in the external side?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it, when I look back on that time, was that I wasn't afraid to say what I didn't know. And that's a big reason why I took the opportunity at Morgan, because I knew I had a great breadth of experience on the internal side. But what I felt like I needed to grow was the external side. And there's no better way to grow than to sit in the seat, right? The athletic director's chair. And so I was methodical. The first thing I knew was we had to grow sponsorships. And when I got to Morgan, we had 8. When I left, we had over 42. Then the second thing I thought we needed to do was really start to build a fundraising base, and all that credit goes to Lydell Sargent. I was able to recruit him away from UCLA, and that's what I talk about by recruiting and being intentional. And Lydell, with a little bit of guidance from me and a lot of work from him, we built the Bear Club, the first annual giving arm for Morgan State athletics in the history of the department. And when I left, Steph, we went from 0 to 1,000 members. And I mean, that's just astronomical in such a short period of time. And then number 3 in the plan was fundraising. And we used to do, when I first arrived at Morgan, we used to do about 100 to 150,000 a year in annual gifts, cash in hand. And when I left Morgan just recently, a couple months ago, to come to Charlottesville, I'm really proud to say we had $3.1 million cash in hand. So that was a significant jump, but it was very intentional. Sponsorships, right? We had to build the annual giving arm, and then we went after major gifts. And I think that plan allowed us to scale Morgan's external side exponentially.
Well, you were doing all of this mostly coming off of a pandemic, coming into and out of a pandemic. But before we get into that, I want to hit on something you just said. You were creating these annual giving habits, and also bringing in new sponsors, in the Baltimore area. How did you message to supporters, to businesses, to kind of tell them, hey, Morgan State is here, we are a player, and we need you?
Well, a lot of it is show and prove, right? I think we had some early victories when we appealed the NCAA case and we got 7 to 10 teams off the postseason ban. We started winning more, right? We won championships in men's and women's tennis and softball, some of those for the first time ever. I think folks started to take notice of the substance. And my sell was, you better get in now on the ground floor, because here's where we're going. This is the vision. And so you're either going to be a part of it or you're going to be watching from the outside. And I think there was an appetite in the Baltimore community for Morgan to be special, Morgan Athletics to be special. And it's something I've learned here from Carla. You can't be afraid to ask. You got to have a plan. You got to articulate it, but you really have to ask for help. And you'd be surprised how the universe gets out of your way and tries to help you when you have a strong plan and people believe in the plan and they believe in you, right? The other thing I know, sitting in the AD chair before, is if people believe you're going to be a good steward of their resources and you can demonstrate that to them, they'll bring other people in the fold, you know, as far as fundraising and sponsorships and support. So that's really how we did it. We built a compelling story. We showed folks how that compelling story was evolving. And then we continued to make the ask. And folks really thought that their money was going to a good cause.
Well, give us a little more detail about that roadmap and about that story you were telling as you were coming off of the pandemic.
Yeah, the biggest thing, I think folks, I got to be honest, I think a lot of folks made a mistake during the pandemic when they started saying, woe is me. And we had a saying at Morgan. If you want detail, I'll give you the saying we used at Morgan during the pandemic. We don't want to survive, we want to thrive. It was a mindset, right? Everything I've ever done has been about the mindset to approach it. And so what we did is we said, how do we thrive? And the way that we thought we could thrive is that we could build the annual arm for giving, right? The annual base during the pandemic because we had more downtime than we normally had. So instead of looking at it and saying we can't compete or we're not going to have butts in seats, you know, fans in the stands, if you will, what we said is, okay, what can we do that will prepare us for when we come out of the pandemic? And so I'm excited for whoever takes the big chair at Morgan after me, because they're going to walk into a situation that, unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to walk into. And I get calls about that all the time when folks are like, well, what do you think about the job? And I tell everyone it's a much different job than when I arrived because the base is built better. We built a foundation. We used to say at Morgan, when we got there, there was a hole in the ground. Dr. Wilson asked me to fill that hole and build a foundation so whoever came after me could then start to build the house on top of it. And I'm very confident based on what I know. And I saw Dr. Wilson at the Final Four that we were able to accomplish that.
Oh, I have so many questions coming off that, but we'll stay on to the pandemic for just a few more minutes. Yeah. You've spoken in some other interviews about using the opportunity to build that external side of Morgan State. Can you give us a little more detail into the process of building out that team? And as you've said again in other interviews, building this edutainment platform.
Yeah, well, I honestly, I stole that from Kevin White. I got to attribute credit to where it goes. About 80% of what we do, Steph, is the education component. The other 20% is pure entertainment, right? I was at Dish Room Park last night and our attendance numbers are up and we've set a single game record already, you know, for attendance at the Dish. And we didn't have the best game last night. But the beauty of that is after that first pitch, folks weren't asking me about GPAs. They wanted to know what happened at Miami, what we were going to be doing for Ryan Zimmerman Day, right? That's the entertainment piece. And I think sometimes we fight that. And I've learned to embrace both. And so what we did specifically at Morgan and Lydell, I think back to Lydell's first 6 months, we didn't have a database of names to go after for our annual fund. And so Lydell gets all the credit on this. He came up with an idea. We had an extensive archive system at Morgan, though, something they did very well. So Lydell spent probably his first 4 to 6 months in the library. Literally, Steph, in the library, cataloging all of the former athletes that were at Morgan. And that's how we built the base, right? The second thing we needed to do was that we knew ticket sales were increasing and sponsorships were increasing at a number where our internal staff could not satisfy the fulfillment. And so we, with the help of Dan Gale and Leona Marketing, we went to market and we said, look, we're very different than we were, but we need help. We need help in ticket sales and we need help in fulfillment for our sponsors. And we had a lot of bidders and we ended up selecting the Aspire Group, the first HBCU to have the Aspire Group have 2 embedded people in our department that still to this day work in Morgan's department. And then we partnered with Anthony Travel, the first HBCU in the country to have an embedded person in our department to assist with travel. So what I learned in those 5 years, Steph, was that I didn't let my ego get in the way. We could have done all those things, but we couldn't do them as well as Aspire. We couldn't do them as well as Anthony Travel. And so I wanted the limited amount of human capital we had focused on our priorities, which were supporting the coaches and the student athletes. And so we went out and found partners that believed in our vision and really helped us accomplish those goals that we had set out.
I love that we keep touching on human capital and building the team. Going back to you, I love putting you in the spotlight and making you talk about yourself, but obviously leadership comes from top down most of the time. And so give us some insight into your leadership style. Talk yourself up a little bit.
Well, it's hard for me to do, Steph. I don't like attention. I like to win, right? And there's a difference between the two. Anyone who's worked with me or for me, right, will tell you that I believe in what's called an inverted pyramid of leadership, where the leader is actually on the bottom, right? So if you take John Wooden's pyramid of success and you flip it upside down, I believe that the leader should be on the bottom for two distinct reasons. And I don't want to nerd out too much, having spent a lot of time studying this. But the first reason is the leader's job is to support the organization. If the leader's at the top, I don't know how you support the organization, right? My job is to serve the people around me, to empower them, to make sure they have the resources they need and put them in position to be successful. If I do that, ultimately, I'm going to be successful because leadership is not about me. It's about what I'm able to get the team to accomplish. The second reason I believe in the inverted pyramid is for communication. So if you've ever tried to put, and anyone on my teams who watches this is going to laugh hysterically because I've talked about this extensively in meetings. If you've ever tried to put oil in your car, you don't just take the plastic bottle of oil and try to dump it in. It would go everywhere. Your engine would start smoking, right? It's a bad idea. Well, we do the same thing, though, when we talk about communication. We don't have communication channels, and we just expect communication to happen efficiently and effectively. So with this upside down pyramid that we have, it's kind of like a filter where you would put oil in your car. You always use a filter. And by doing that, the information comes from the ground floor, the people up top, to the middle management, to the senior management, ultimately to the CEO, which was me. So I would be able to get inordinate amounts of information. So when I was making a decision, I wasn't doing it from the AD chair, just thinking this is best. I was doing it based on several data points that I was able to get from my team. So I have a very strategic focus on leadership and how I lead and how I communicate. And if I was going to say the only thing that I would give myself credit for, it was employing that strategy and that focus, which then allowed my team to perform better than they normally would.
Well, as you mentioned, you came to Morgan and it was a very different place. You built out your team a bit there. Give us some insight into you as an interviewer. If I am here and I wanted to be on your team at Morgan State and I'm sitting across the table from you, what did you look for in that team that you built?
Yeah, so I look for attributes, right? I don't look at somebody who can just do the job. There are a lot of people who can do a job, but at Morgan, we needed grit, we needed perseverance, we needed ingenuity, creativity, right? So when we were interviewing folks, that's what we were looking for. It wasn't just, okay, does this person have the experience in the background to be able to do the job? It's, can they thrive in a difficult environment where the things we're trying to do have never been done before? So if I'm interviewing you, it's typically anywhere I'm at, it's going to be unconventional. I want to know about you. I want to know about your why. I want to know about your purpose. I want to know what drives you. If you're in my final candidate pool, even if you're a coach, for any job that we're offering, I know you can do the job already. That's not what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out the fit, and I'm trying to figure out how you go about doing your job on a daily basis. And so I would say unconventional and at times uncomfortable. I think about Lydell Sargent and Terrence Lally, two folks that I brought in their first 6 months. I think were probably more difficult for them working with me than they have been at other places, particularly because I give a certain amount of autonomy. And a lot of folks are used to taking direction and just carrying out orders. And I hope in my first 2.5 months or so here at UVA, what I've been able to demonstrate to Carla and others is once I hear what we're trying to do, it's my job to figure out how to help us get there. And that's what my senior team was really able to do at Morgan, which then freed me up to raise money, to deal with politics across campus, and chart the vision or the course for our athletic department.
I love all of that. Well, let's tap into just a couple of your highlights from your time at Morgan. Again, you are a Cushman Wakefield Athletic Director of the Year. Tell us the story behind the $2.7 million gift, the largest in Morgan State history and in HBCU history.
Yes, to date. And I hope Courtney or someone at Morgan breaks it, right? Records are made to be broken, but we're proud of that. And so it started with a conversation with Beat the Streets Wrestling. So a lot of folks don't know this. Beat the Streets is a grassroots organization that tries to work with youth in urban areas, and particularly minority youth, to get them involved in the sport of wrestling. Dr. Wilson gets all the credit for this. Before I got there, he gave them access to our facilities. And so it was something that was grandfathered in when I arrived. And then what I realized is they tied it into engineering and STEM opportunities, which Morgan does a phenomenal job at on their campus. And so, you know, just spending time with Lydell Henry, the gentleman who runs that for the Baltimore organization, to Beat the Streets, and then talking to Lydell Sargent, I started to say, is there some synergy here? Then we noticed that 5 of the 10 national championships were of African-American descent, but there were no HBCUs offering wrestling. Right. So as you start to have these conversations and you start to look at the gaps, my job, one of the things I think I'm decent at is filling in gaps, right? Seeing what other people are trying to do and then finding a creative way of making that happen. And so that's what we did. We had some conversations with HBCUW, the wrestling program, to bring it back to HBCUs, and then Mike Novogratz. And we laid out a financial plan that would make the university money, that would allow the donor to feel really good about the money they were going to give, because particularly we endowed 1.5 million of that. So Morgan is bound to keep that wrestling program. So the donor said to us, wait a minute, you're also going to protect my money? And so it was a way of finding a win-win-win. And the thing I'm most proud about is it's going to provide access and opportunity for young men who want an HBCU experience and they want to wrestle and compete for national championships. And so the gift is great, but what the gift signifies and what it's actually going to do for human beings is the best part about bringing in that 2.7.
That is what fundraising really is all about. Turning to facilities, again, tremendous accomplishments there during your tenure at Morgan. What did you learn through the whole process of facilities enhancements and fundraising for those projects?
Yeah, I think they're different, right? They don't tug at heartstrings the same way like bringing in $2.7 million to restart wrestling does. But when you're working with facilities, they do 2 things. They show people you care, right? And they really help in recruiting. And that's what I mean by care. Recruits care about that nowadays. The other thing is we had a unique opportunity at Morgan, if you will, and Terrence Lally gets a lot of credit for this. What we would try to do is we would try to upgrade a facility during every break. So whether it was winter break and then the big projects in the summer. So when the students came back, we wouldn't tell them what we were doing, but we would upgrade a facility. We built a new academic center. We upgraded the turf, put in new turf, a brand new track surface, which was a $2.5 million project. We put up video boards in every venue we had. So every time the students came back, there was something new waiting for them. And they just kept going, oh my God, they care about us. They're investing in us. And I am a firm believer of where you put your resources tells the world where your priorities are. And the facilities we inherited at Morgan were not at the championship level they needed to be at for our coaches and our student athletes to be able to compete at the highest level. So it was intentional. The donors were great. We had some state money. We also had a lot of private funds that went into that. And I think the thing that I was really proud about is when the donors came back, or some of the state politicians to Morgan's campus, they were really excited about where their money went or where their energy went. And anytime you can do that for a donor, it begets more donors. And we had a lot of folks who were repeat donors because they were able to see that we were good stewards of their dollars.
Well, you had so much success at Morgan State, but one last thing I want to touch on is the academic side. You increased the graduation rate by 19%. GPA increased to 3.41. Yeah. Tell us what surprised you about that growth, that progress.
You're going to make me emotional. Honestly, for me, that was the biggest thing that I've ever done anywhere I've ever been. The reason why I think some of your viewers will know this, but those who don't know my story, I'm a first generation college student. Nobody in my family's ever gone to college and got a degree, let alone get an undergrad, a master's, and now a PhD. It's the reason why I chose to come to Virginia, because you know from being a Who how important the academic component is. And so for me, that's the part that's been a great equalizer in my life, right? I could hit a baseball, I could run really fast. I don't run that fast anymore. So when you come to ground, Steph, we're not going for a jog. I'll take you out for dinner or something. But for me, the academic piece is the part that is going to change the lives of those young men and women who came through Morgan when I was the athletic director forever. And we focused heavily on that. I got a lot of pushback when I first got to Morgan about the GPA benchmark that we sent for study hall, about why we had to invest money in class checkers and tutors and a lot of those other variables that I knew from my internal background equate to success. And yes, we not only raised the GPA, but we raised the graduation rate by 19%. There was one semester where we had only 2 ineligible student athletes in the entire department, right? I mean, so what surprised me the most, you asked that question, I want to answer it specifically. The ability of the students to adapt to the bar that we set. I learned so much about 18 to 22-year-olds at Morgan State University that if you set a bar and if you articulate why it's important for them to reach that goal, and then you give them the resources to be able to do that, and you show them you truly care about them as human beings, 9 out of 10 human beings are going to do everything in their power to hit that bar. It wasn't what I did. I set the stage with Terrence, with the academic staff that we built, you know, the 4 or 5 people we added. But the young people did all the work, Steph. I didn't go to class for them, right? I didn't take the tests. I didn't write the papers. Now, when I was working on my PhD, I did get tutored for the quantitative piece in the mornings with the football guys. And I think that led by example, that if Doc can do this, as they call me here and at Morgan, my nickname, that if Doc is willing to do this every morning after he works out and he can put in this work, then I can do this too. And that's the part that you almost brought a tear to my eye, to be honest with you, because that's the part that I will always hold dear and near to my heart, being the AD at Morgan State University.
You are giving me goosebumps. Last question for you. As we've mentioned several times, you are now at Virginia. You are not the AD at Morgan State anymore. Right. How do you handle critique of Morgan State now that you are not there anymore? As I was doing some prep for this, you know, I found a few articles that were critiquing decisions or recommending changes. How do you handle that now that you are no longer in the position to make changes or to give pushback?
Well, you know, it's going to sound interesting. I think being a former baseball player has really helped me with that. Playing baseball, especially at a high level, Division I, you learn 2 things: patience and failure. And so for me, right, I mean, I hit 339 for my career. So that means I failed almost 7 out of 10 times and I still got back up. I've learned to distinguish between the noise versus constructive criticism. I think sitting in the AD chair was instrumental to build that skill set. And now being able to watch Carla and watch when she gets credit, watch when she has some detractors, and knowing what's fair and unfair, and looking at it from this angle. And so, listen, at the end of the day, when my day comes and goes and I meet whoever my maker is, I will be able to look at them and say, I did everything in my power that I thought was in the best interest of Morgan State. That's the barometer, right? The barometer is your coaches, your staff, and your student athletes. And if you know you've done right by them, there's not a lot that the outside noise can do. Now, it also tells me we built a passionate fan base at Morgan, because if we weren't doing well, nobody would have been paying attention, right? And so it's all about how you frame it and you perceive it. And for me, I perceive it as people care about Morgan. They want Morgan to be in a certain position, and that's a good thing. And if I had any hand in that, then I'm really proud of what we were able to do.
You should be, Ed. So much accomplishment during your tenure at Morgan State. Congratulations again on this recognition as a Cushman Wakefield AD of the Year. And I will say, for Who's Everywhere, I am very excited that you are in Charlottesville these days. Thank you so much for taking time and reflecting with us.
It's been a pleasure, Steph. Anytime that we get to spend time together is always fun. And I just want to say, lastly, thank you to the staff, to the student athletes, the coaches at Morgan State, and thank you to my new Virginia family who's really embraced me. And when you get the ground, Steph, we'll spend some time together. But until then, wahoo wah.
Wahoo wah.